a case study specifically around the intervention of systematic instruction. So I guess I wanted to reiterate the importance of knowing where the cognitive barrier is. So when we support someone with a task, the turning point is knowing where actually the memory actually sits. So hopefully you've already done the cognitive hierarchy and you can understand that actually we have various cognitive skills and we need to determine where the actual barrier is. So it could be attention, memory, or up in our executive function, our higher level function. And if we don't know the barrier itself, we actually end up recommending really generic stuff. And most of the time I would suggest that is often compensatory strategies. But when we actually know the cognitive barrier, we can actually pinpoint the exact stage that it breaks down and what actual cognitive intervention that we should actually be focusing on. So systematic instruction is a type of cognitive support intervention. So it's a really emphasis on error control to ensure correct learning. So systematic instruction is the breakdown of the task so each individual component can be learnt correctly. So this is really useful for individuals with difficulty of information processing, memory difficulties, or executive function difficulties, because we're not teaching them the wrong thing, we're only teaching them the correct thing. So a common systematic instruction is an errorless learning, which is creating an activity where all tasks are set up to be correct, such as when you're implementing a new app for them to use, you actually knowing exactly how to implement that and get them to where they need to be, rather than going, oh, maybe we click this button. Oh, no, that's not correct. Click this button. So when we think about systematic instruction, it's being really clear and systematic, process, procedural driven in our instruction. So we want to make sure they're only getting the correct information. Another example of errorless learning systematic instruction, and a common one, is space retrieval. So actually learning new information by cementing information through high repetition and minimal variation. So repetition of correct information while spacing out the time of delivery, and every correct answer double the time. There's actually, I will link in, there's actually a little template that I have access to of what to do. So you can also use distraction throughout the conversation depending on what information you are implementing. So for example, if someone has difficulty remembering your name, if you request them, what's my name? Immediate answer is wrong. So you say, it's actually Imogen, that's correct. So then 15 seconds later, what's my name? Imogen, then we link 30 seconds later, what's my name? Imogen, that's correct. 60 seconds later, and we keep going. I think it's like 15 minutes total. So you go CC2, 4, and it will extend out. And obviously in those longer periods of time, that's when you will want to think about doing other conversations to help with that space retrieval challenge. And if you don't get it correct after the 15 seconds, it's likely not a suitable intervention. And if someone makes 3 errors, then it's time to finish the activity as well. So you could think about this might be understanding their new address or understanding the person they need to call if they've got a new support worker agency, and different aspects of their daily life can definitely be utilised for this space retrieval. So this is a video, I will play it, and it's a clinical setting of errorless learning.
Hi, Susan, how are you?
Hi, I'm okay.
All right. Well, today we're going to do something new in therapy. I want to help you learn and remember that every day, now that you're home, you need to leave with your mom and get on a bus at 8 o'clock every morning. We want you to remember that so that you can help her get you ready in time so that the two of you get out of the house so you can make the bus. So you need to be ready to leave the house at 8 o'clock. So here's a picture of the clock, and this says 8 o'clock, right? So what time do you need to be ready to leave the house? 8 o'clock is correct.
Yeah.
8 o'clock, you have to be ready to leave the house. 8 o'clock, what time? 8 o'clock is right. What time do you need to be ready to leave the house?
8 o'clock.
Excellent. 8 o'clock. What does that say? 8 o'clock is the time you have to be ready to leave the bus. You have to be ready to leave the house at 8 o'clock. That's right. You got to leave the house at 8 o'clock. Excellent. What time? At 8 o'clock. You leave the house at
8 o'clock.
Excellent. So that quickly shows errorless learning, where the goal is to prevent the patient from making any mistakes by giving them the correct answer. In this case, we gave it on a schematic of a clock. You could use a real clock or watch in real life. The hands of the clock were pointing to 8, and the number or the time 8 o'clock was written under the clock. The patient did make one error because of a rephrasing by the clinician of the question, but the clinician quickly followed up with the accurate answer and then went back to the question posed as originally presented, again pointing to both places where the patient could get the answer to again reinforce the correct answer and prevent any future mistake. As time goes on with this, the clinician would fade, providing so much cues for 8 o'clock, increase the amount of time over which the patient was asked to answer the question, and hopefully master errorless learning to be ready for the bus at 8.
So I wanted to give a case study of a scenario. This is a real life client that I used to work with and determined that they had an information processing and difficulty with selective attention. So they had hypoxic brain injury, they had difficulty with dog obedience training and learning new skills. They had a really supportive family and formal supports. So what I actually did was I did the cognitive assessment of Minnesota, the self-rating scales and meal prep assessment, which I identified reduced foresight and planning, reduced capacity for more than 2 set directions, rigidity in planning, reduced abstract reasoning, reduced recall for auditory and motor planning. So we can determine that they have difficulty with information processing and selective attention.
I briefly wanted to jump in here. This is a question after I facilitated the training about information processing and a reminder of what it is. So I thought it would fit well here. But effectively, information processing is how we gather information, how we write it on our sketchpad, and how we encode it, and then how we retrieve that information. So a great example is a little sketchpad, and you write all your information on your sketchpad, and then you choose what you'd like to encode in order to remember that information. So for this person who has difficulty with dog obedience training, they were actually putting everything on their sketchpad, everything from what they had worn that day, how it's feeling against their skin, and then they couldn't encode that information because they were just overloaded. There was too much information. And this intervention that we were actually talking about helps with that encoding of correct information. So it's going to help with taking the information that they put in their sketchpad and actually not putting unnecessary information in that sketchpad, so they can actually encode it, and then when they need it, they can actually retrieve it, process it, and do what they will with it.
So if you know anything about dog obedience training, you will know that you will need to have all of these skills to actually enable you to be successful at dog obedience training, because you have to do hard turn left and then a U-turn left, and a hard turn right and a U-turn right, and there's different scenarios where the dog has to be inside and leg, outside leg, etc. So what we actually did is I provided, once I found out this information, it was really clear that the multidisciplinary team were actually not supporting them in an errorless way. So I actually had the client film their instructor who was instructing them on how to actually engage in obedience, and what they were doing was actually asking them a lot of questions, being very traditional teacher role, where they would say, is it left or right? And they wouldn't really know. So that just set them up for failure. So what we actually did is I spoke to the client, who totally agreed with the information processing difficulty, and then I educated them on why we like errorless learning, and then we actually engaged with educating everyone. So what we actually did after the education was we completed the actual setup of errorless learning a little bit. I actually did this with them, and I had a really clear checklist for instruction. So I had a script, and then what I did was I actually handed that over to support workers to an allied health assistant actually to engage in that. We had the cones with the arrows depicting where to go. So the script and the cones were associated. We also removed stimulus and only did one step at a time. So if we remember, 2 steps scenarios were difficult, and gave immediate feedback. So it wasn't like finish the whole route and then say, what do you think you did well? It was, you did this wrong, stop. It's actually this way. So we can see where we're creating an errorless learning, a systematic instruction for that information processing difficulty by making it functional and the task at hand. And I would also say that this client was already doing errorless. They were like 17 years post brain injury, and they had already organically worked out how they actually learn. And so the example that they gave to me was whenever they would need to go to a new place, they rode their bike, and their dad would actually come with them and do the route 10, 20 times until exactly how it was supposed to go, until they were able to remember it and had it etched in their memory. So that's a really clear example of errorless learning, but in the real world as well. Any questions with that case study?